I felt I needed to operate with like as a CEO, but felt this tension because I wasn't the chief executive anything. I was just the chief everything officer. And what I learned from operating is the less I could do was contingent on setting other people up for success. And not all struggle is bad. Like you want to know that you have the ability to do something hard and overcome it. I think that once you've gone through it, this is a high quality problem that we get to try something hundreds of times. And that iteration is not bad, that failure is not final, that we get to keep going and that the struggle creates the possibility for us to be successful.
Welcome to the If They Knew What I Know podcast. Today we have Vijay Rajendran on, and it's exciting to have him on as a post-exit founder as well. He is a venture builder at GAI Ventures. He's the author of The Funding Framework, which is a #1 new release in venture capital on Amazon. He's an educator at Berkeley and an executive coach to high-growth CEOs. And today he'll be sharing his experience and wisdom on what it takes to be a leader in the startup space. Thanks for coming on today, Vijay.
My pleasure, Matt. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing with GAI Ventures.
Well, GAI Ventures is what we call a venture builder. And that is, we serve as a co-founder and incubator for startups specifically focused on vertical AI in 3 areas: financial services, commerce, and enterprise productivity. And what we do is work with domain experts, experienced founders, or people who are even spinning out of industry to create companies that solve real problems with AI. And in a matter of months, we stand up those businesses and, of course, invest in them too.
Very nice. And you also just got your first puppy.
Yes, that's right. I have at my feet Willow, who is a 9-week-old Bernedoodle.
Okay. What can you tell us about your experiences so far with managing a puppy that might be similar or different to managing some of the CEOs that you work with?
Well, the one thing about founders is that they're very independent-minded. So it's interesting, when I was much earlier in my career and for a while had a stint in management consulting, you knew like how to influence a Fortune 100 executive team or board, right? There were a certain set of things that were very clear. What I know about a puppy is that it is learning at a very fast rate. And so that is similar to starting a startup. And I don't think I've ever thought about it before until you just posed the question. But that fast rate of learning means it needs to have a very clear goal and needs to see what the payoff for that goal is. So you do this thing right, you get a treat. And positive reinforcement is the best training tool. And that is true, I think, for startup founders. So what can go right? What do we do that pays off? Where's the ROI in our efforts or in our spend? How can I spend my day working on things that get the love of my customers or my humans? I think all those things together, for me, are what's analogous. Many things are different, but certainly there are some reminders of what works well for founders.
Yeah. Speaking of some of the rapid change and fast-paced things that are going on, what's your experience right now with where AI is going and founders?
We're in a really confusing time. I think, if you think about just in the last year, people went from saying we don't want to invest or buy GPT wrappers to then people in enterprise saying in B2B software, we don't need to buy any more SaaS, we'll just build it ourselves, to then finding, oh, it's actually really hard to build some of these products internally. Maybe we do need to buy, and then seeing an uptick in the number of new customers onboarded to many of the AI native products out there in startup land. and then seeing a whole bunch of churn. As it turns out, some of those B2B customers were just learning, right? And at the same time, all the foundation models are adding new features and new capabilities that make their own products better. So the takeaway there is building with an obsession for the customer and thinking what becomes sticky for them such that they don't churn, they feel this is for me, this isn't something that I could just do with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or something else. And I think those are some of the takeaways that, at least for now, we know from this time of great playbook writing and rewriting.
And we mentioned earlier that you sit in a slightly different seat than many founders. You've been an operator, an investor, a coach. How has moving between those roles changed the way you see leadership?
So when I was a founder, particularly the first time around, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I felt I needed to operate with like as a CEO, but felt this tension because I wasn't the chief executive anything. I was just the chief everything officer.
Yeah.
And what I learned from operating is the less I could do was contingent on setting other people up for success. And so that move from chief everything officer to chief executive officer was not like flipping a switch. There was actually this like middle stage, and it starts off very small, but then becomes very important. And then ideally kinds of tapers off until you're like man a team and teams of teams. And that middle stage is called chief enablement officer. So the CEO role has these like three phases. And I think enabling and setting other people up for success wasn't something I was very good at. I'm probably someone who could still benefit from doing it better. But that's because I didn't realize there wasn't one type of delegation. I didn't realize many things. And so my own journey of getting coaching as a leader and as a manager, and then later as an investor, seeing the pattern repeat again and again with the many hundreds of companies I got to work with during my time at 500 Startups, also known as 500 Global now, where was super helpful. And so in the last like couple of years, I brought a lot of that to coaching the half a dozen late stage executives and early stage founders that I work with in this direction and in this evolution, I should say. And it helps me a lot in understanding, okay, yes, do everything right now, but let's be smart about what we can enable in the future for others or today for even agents and third-party systems.
That middle stage that you talk about is it can be painful for a lot of people.
Super
And,
hard.
and you mentioned what's that?
It's super hard. You're right.
Yeah, and you mentioned the enablement aspect of it. What did you do to get through it? You said you got some coaching, but can you go in a little bit more detail about, how you did
Yeah.
it and maybe if there were any mistakes that you learned from it or any great things that you learned from it that you now take with you?
Yeah. I think there were three things. The first came to the four types of delegation that I learned from coaching and from observing others. The second was around figuring out what people need at work, which is not what I need from to get out of my work, but maybe what they did. And then the third one is around understanding, what is my area of genius, competence, and frustration. So the first one around the four steps of delegation, I realized, I might have a management style, but right now my style needs to be adaptable to others. And so what does that mean? There's like a continuum of competence, and it starts with like low confidence and ends with like high confidence and high confidence. And for people who have that high confidence and high confidence, you don't have to like micromanage them. But for a lot of other people, you need to provide them with direction. And maybe it's because they're learning. So understanding where people are on a particular task requires you not to be able to do it expertly, but to know it well enough to make them successful. That means perhaps for some people, you have to direct them. For other people, you may say, come up with some ideas. I own the decision versus really delegating or saying that you make the call. but like keep me updated on how it's going. And I want to be involved in this way. And so letting them know like what that is and what the intervals are that you will check in are important. And then finally, there's that fourth step, which is how to defer to people to say, this is a thing and you've got this. And I know last time you did it this way, so I'm going to leave it with you. And let's like tell me when it's done or don't tell me, which is good, fine too. The second part, which was around what people need is, I think it takes a long time to finally like click, oh, people value radically different things from one person to the next. That means for some people, it's rewards, be they economic or otherwise, it is recognition. For others, it is they need to feel a deep sense of respect at work. And those three R's are really different from person to person. So the earlier you figure out what makes people tick in one of those like three categories, the better. I mean, all people want to be good at their job. They want mastery. People want to feel like there's purpose, right? That those things are not negotiable, and founders that understand their why certainly can articulate that well. But every individual in those three R's, rewards, respect, and recognition, tend to differ from one to another. And then that third category, it sort of came when I did an assessment that I recommend people look at called Working Genius. And this was developed by Patrick Lencioni and the Table Group, which is just a wonderful way of understanding, look, there's different stages of work. And some of these things, probably the things that you put off, are your areas of frustration. And it's okay to know that. And you might actually do the things that are areas of frustration. And you might actually be better than some people. You could be above average in areas of frustration, but that doesn't mean they're things that create energy for you. And then there are things that you don't even, recognize are areas of genius, but they're there. And that's really important to identify. And that doesn't mean I just work on the areas of genius. All kinds of work needs to be done, but from a mindset standpoint, you say like, okay, I'm going to work on this thing that is a frustration or even a competence, and maybe bring in somebody to partner and who's complementary. Like that is a huge unlock. So we always say like, when it comes to co-founders or it comes to like teammates, you want a well-rounded team or a balanced team or something like that. But I think what we want is people whose strengths complement each other or genius areas complement each other in this way, because that can unlock just something really magical.
Mm. You talk about frustration and confidence. You spend time with founders under real pressure. Let's take a little bit of a transition over to uncertainty as compared to those other two feelings that they're going through. What do you notice about how experienced founders process uncertainty differently than earlier in their careers, or differently than those that don't have that experience?
That's a very good question. I think uncertainty looks like something that is staring you in the face, where if you've gone through this before, you're like, okay, I went through something where I didn't know exactly who the customer was, or I didn't know who the right investor was going to be, or something like that, or if we're going to make payroll at the end of the month. And I went through this before and it didn't kill me. And so I think that's the biggest thing is we went through something hard and it didn't kill me. Whereas the first time you're going through it, you're like, I think this is going to kill us. I think this is going to, I think the next big thing is existential and catastrophic. And so that's like the biggest difference. So if you've gone through a couple startups, if you've made it a couple investments and that have, gone up in smoke, you realize, you know, nothing is ever as good or bad as it seems. And I think that that is the kind of wisdom that an experienced founder has. The first time around, I thought we're going to be like dead in 90 days, like at any given point for some reason. Not because I was a pessimist, because I didn't have the clarity about what's coming next. So do you have clarity as an experienced founder? No, I think you have I think you have clarity about your ideas and about what you're good at and what you're not good at and other things, but you don't know how it's going to turn out, but you know you have an ability to figure it out.
That is a pretty incredible superpower that a lot of successful founders harness. You mentioned kind of the reactive behavior when the experience isn't there. Where do you see leaders reacting instead of shaping outcomes during some of these types of stages?
All the problems in technology businesses are people problems, not tech problems. Well, not all, but like 90%.
Interesting.
And so I think, yeah, there are co-founder disagreements where people say, "Oh, yeah, I know you're working on this thing, but actually now, like, we should do like focus on something else." And that sort of attachment that different people have to different things they were working on, or the pivot, or they say, "Oh, yeah, actually, our best feature is this," and someone's like, "Oh, no, I don't agree on that," right? So, like, fundamentally, like different views of what it is our product for, who's our customer, and what success looks like can be the causes of a bunch of rifts that unaddressed and without the ability to talk about them can escalate and snowball into something much bigger.
I want to shift from kind of that painful growth phase to after a major transition or after an exit. What are you seeing about how the founder's view of leadership changes after that time period?
So there's two types of founders that go through this experience. There's people who were founders or core team members early on that as the business grows, they feel first out of the loop of what's happening and what's important and talked about, and then later, perhaps in a less critical role than maybe they were at the beginning, because maybe they were a generalist and they were awesome, but now the company needs a bunch of specialists in certain seats. Or perhaps there are experienced leaders who come into the picture that are necessary and end up supplanting or taking a bigger role than those individuals. So that's like one set. And then the other case is founders that realize they really love the product and they love thinking and they're an ex product manager or something like that. And they struggle with the administrative burden, with the governance requirements, with the fundraising parts of running a venture scale and a venture backed company. So I can see like those particular examples in my experience as really significant because the founder CEO's role isn't just one dimensional. Of course, it is around at first hiring and then owning the culture, and then later, of course, owning first the idea and then the strategy, and then of course fundraising as well, because you want to make sure the business is properly capitalized, and you spend a third of your life talking to investors and developing those relationships and things like that. So at some point, the individual and what they find they have to do and the area versus the areas of their competence or their frustration, like can create this heavy burden. They don't know what to call it. It just feels like this huge weight around them. That is
Mm.
actually a low grade form of burnout, where you're doing something that is draining. You can work extremely hard in areas that are super like fun and you're good at and you love and are your areas of genius. But I think that's one of the other ways in which those founders' lives start to change, and then they have to ask themselves, "Am I the right person in this seat?"
So, with all that heaviness, why are so many founders going on after they exit to found something else?
That's a great question. Why do people love doing this again and again? I think there's a few reasons, and there's probably a small percentage of the population is very future oriented and can't tolerate, living with the problems of today, and they have to do something about it. There's
Mhm.
another variety of person that just craves autonomy and loves being their own boss and self-employed and so forth. But you don't have to be a startup founder to be your own boss. There's plenty of other ways to be that. But I think that's a contributing factor. And I think like thirdly, like they realize they're great at perhaps 0 to 1. in particular, and maybe one 0 to 1 plus, like 1 to 100 or a million or whatever, but they have a talent for starting things up quickly and finding hole in the market or something like that. And so when they see another opportunity and they can't stop thinking about that, starting a business then feels magical. It feels like a calling to go and do something about the problem they see in the world or the needs they need to address.
What do they only understand after they've been through it once?
Yeah, I think Jensen Wang said in an interview last year, if I knew now or if I knew then what I knew now, I don't think I would start NVIDIA again because it was so painful. And there was so much like personal suffering, and the company owners died like so many times, right? So obviously he's built the one of the most successful companies of all time, but I think those comments kind of like capture that they know that there's this struggle, and there's something like a good struggle out there in the world. Like not all struggle is bad. Like you want to know that you have the ability to do something hard and overcome it. That's the thing that we want to teach our kids, and we know that that's what makes them resilient. And so I think that once you've gone through it, yeah, this is a high quality problem that we get to, you know, try something hundreds of times, and that iteration is not bad, that failure is not final, that we get to keep going, and that the struggle creates the possibility for us to be successful.
Makes sense. If founders could borrow one piece of perspective from their future selves, what would it be?
I think there's three things. The first is talk to more customers. Like the one thing that every customer wants is for them to A, feel special, and B, for the people they do business with to listen to them. So just listen to customers. And there's no startup out there that's spending too much time on this. So I think that's number one. I think number two is don't get caught up in hype, because whatever it seems uh, like the important and the trendy thing right now is going to pass, and it will happen. And people's memories are short. So just focus on delighting your customers, building a great place to work, and of course, uh, creating strong relationships with capital providers, and avoid like whatever is important and hype, and you need to be a part of like whatever bandwagon that's temporary. And then the third thing is to to focus on developing a high trust environment where people can work. And the reason that's important is high trust creates strong culture, certainly, but also high quality communication. And when there's high quality communication, there's rhythm in the company, and results are a lot easier. What most people do is they may go about it backwards. They may say, okay, I said this thing, and if you do the thing I said, there's this consistency. I'm getting the results, and then I will trust you. And when you figure out, what are the conditions for trust between people, and not just in an outcomes way, but holistically, I think that is a good step towards uh, getting the results you want, because you've got really high quality communication and things like that in place.
When I hear you talk about how important trust is between people,
Yeah,
and how important effective communication is, I can't help but think about artificial intelligence right now and how those concepts have very unique interplay with the way in which we're all using AI right now. I think
yeah,
trust is and communication. Communication is somewhat enhanced but less personalized. And trust is something that either some people blindly have or don't actually have any of it with AI. What's
You're right.
what's your thought about those concepts and the interplay with where we're headed with AI, both in the startup world and how we're all using it?
Yeah. Again, it's one of those confusing landscapes.
Yeah.
A friend of mine likes to say we're in a trust recession. And that doesn't mean it's permanent. I think it's a condition of like a loss of trust because of things that are happening in the world. But that means we can certainly create a better environment and better world if we do a few things right. So we're still figuring out how to do that. But in an age, yes, where the majority of content on the internet created every day is done by AI, where the veracity of things really needs to be tested, where we don't have a lot of confidence in the information that we receive. I think it is like really it is really hard to like see what is trusted. So I think the responsibility, at least if you're building a business, is to show up and be human and like let people feel they're connecting to you and they can reach your company and build trust early on. And I'll give you an example. A way in
Please.
which we know we can do that is when we build a new company at GAI Ventures. We try and focus within the first month on developing a design partnership. So we don't even have a product yet, but we're trying to like learn in the real world and test our hypotheses. Now, no one should just automatically work with us because we said, oh, we can work on something to solve your problems. But we try and develop trust through a few ways. One is to, yes, have a high say and do ratio, like ideally 1 to 1, right? And then the second part is to understand those folks' businesses and how they think, and whether they're, a small business lending broker or perhaps small wealth manager or someone like that. Just taking the time to not just interview, but to ask a lot of good questions is important to build the right thing for them. And then in a sandbox way or in a proof of concept way, like figure out how we deploy something in a way that captures low hanging fruit, shows that we're there, be able to apply the brakes if necessary, and if we've got to pivot, but in a way uh, that is both transparent and provides a high amount of communication about what it is we're doing and is what we're going to do. And sometimes we may get something wrong, but so that people feel our high intention through doing this, they give us the feedback we need so that when we build the MVP for this product and roll that business out to many different types of customers, then we've gathered a lot of high quality information, not just did you like it? Yes, no. Do you use this? Yes. How well did the data get imported and uploaded in the right place, and you visualize it properly, and you're able to, and it was like actually correct. Like we get more than just the sort of binary. We get a lot of like context and texture from having just spent time to earn that trust.
What do you now pay attention to that you didn't earlier in your career?
I think the thing that I pay attention to more and is incentives. So Charlie Munger famously said, "Show me the incentives, not show me the result." And so I asked myself, like, what are the incentives? Because I think as a person who wants to give first, as a person who uh, wants to support others, I just assumed a lot of people had the same motivations, but motivations and incentives are different. So motivations get you part of the way. Incentives are what cross the finish line. And so this is something over the last 10 years I've been looking at. So Richard Thaler, the Nobel laureate economist, wrote the book Nudge about how you can create opt in or opt out, or different types of conditions that get people to do different kinds of activities. So a great example is if the 401k of your company is opt out, then more people participate and they benefit from the match. So like that's super important when we think about incentives. So it's not just about how do I coerce or bribe someone or something like that. This is not about manipulation. It's a combination of incentives and motivation that are important internally and externally.
You have an incredible amount of wisdom and expertise to impart upon others. How much of that did you effectively transfer when you last exited a business?
Well, first of all, that's very generous of you. I think it's really hard to transfer wisdom because wisdom is the product of experience and experience is the product of mistakes. So like maybe there's a way to transfer that. I'm not sure I did well, if ever, but in terms of experience, I think, helping people understand foundationally what is the why behind something and what it is we need to do is either shared or it's not shared. So there should be shared values, belief, purpose, and all these things together. If people have heard them, and if you shouted them enough, can become contagious. And so hopefully then other people feel that same calling in their own unique way, but with some common understanding of the why. So perhaps the experience shows up maybe in the way you one-on-one train someone, maybe in the way you directed something to be developed, but most importantly in the shared beliefs, values, and purpose that you create behind any business.
Makes sense. Vijay, thanks so much for coming on If They Knew What I Know today. If our listeners want to get a hold of you to either learn more about GAI Ventures or working with you personally, what's the best way for them to reach out?
I'd love to meet people thinking about their next business they want to start. And the best way to find out more about GAI Ventures is at gai.ventures. That's gai.ventures. If you want to see some more things I'm thinking about working on, then I write at startupsystem.substack.com. And particularly if folks are interested in fundraising, which is probably top of mind for a lot of your listeners, then my book, The Funding Framework, which came out about a year ago, is available where it looks like this. The Funding Framework is available where great books are sold online.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Vijay. Thanks for listening. Please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast player. And if you'd like to connect, visit us at contingency.com or find us on LinkedIn.